The church doors swung open just as the choir fell silent, and every head turned toward the wind. Snow blew in off Lake Michigan like a warning, and in the doorway stood Sheila Bennett, the woman William Ramirez had divorced last spring, wearing a simple black coat that didn't hide the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy. William's hand tightened around the program for his mother's funeral. The paper tore between his fingers. Beside him, Vanessa Pierce, his impeccably poised fiancée, leaned in and whispered, "She's here to make a scene." Sheila didn't speak. She walked down the aisle, gaze steady, stopping at the front pew where a velvet-cased envelope should have been. It wasn't there. Somewhere behind William's composed profile, a clock began to tick. The sanctuary smelled of lilies and winter wool. William stood when the pastor gestured to him. Words about Eleanor Ramirez, visionary, philanthropist, stern mother, rose from his throat and braided into the vaulted ceiling. He spoke of scrubbed Sunday shoes and sharp lessons about money. It's a tool, not a master. He didn't speak of the last argument he'd had with Eleanor, when she'd said, "You confuse control with care." When he stepped down, the pastor invited those with personal memories to share. A man from the foundation spoke. So did a neighbor with a tray of casseroles waiting in her car. Then, as if willed by the hush, Sheila rose. Vanessa's hand squeezed William's wrist. "Don't engage," she murmured. Sheila approached the lectern in flats that looked practical and tired. Her voice, when it came, was unvarnished. "Mrs. Ramirez sent me an email in August. She said family is the contract you can't tear up. She asked me to visit. I came once, quietly. We talked about forgiveness and responsibility." She paused, palms splayed over her stomach. "She asked me to keep a promise. She said I would know when." Murmurs swirled. William's jaw worked. He remembered Eleanor in August, thinner and newly tender, asking him who he'd become. He had said defensively, "A man who keeps things running." She had sighed, like a generator humming in a storm. Useful, loud, cold. Sheila's eyes moved to the front pew. The space where Eleanor's attorney had said a velvet case would sit with an envelope inside, to be read after the service. It was gone. She looked back at the room. "I'm not here to make trouble," she said. "I'm here to keep a promise." Afterward, people pressed Sheila with condolence and curiosity. Vanessa offered her an air kiss of compassion, so brittle it could cut. "You must be exhausted," Vanessa said, voice pitched for eavesdroppers. "These late months can be so unpredictable." Sheila's reply was quiet. "They're predictable enough if you've done this before." William blinked, the meaning striking him with a dull, old ache. He hadn't been there the last time. He'd been at a board retreat. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Black cars idled. Across the parking lot, Marlowe Kim, Eleanor's longtime lawyer, stood beneath a cedar, talking into her phone with her coat flung half-closed. William approached with the old deference he'd shown Marlowe since his father's time. "Where is the envelope?" he asked. Marlowe's eyes were dark with apology. "It was supposed to be under the spray at the front pew. It isn't. I had it last evening. I put it there myself after I closed the casket room. I'm looking into the cameras now." "Cameras?" Vanessa repeated lightly. "In a church? How tacky." Marlowe didn't smile. "We've experienced attempted document interference before." A gust sent snow spinning. William glanced back toward the doors, where Sheila stood, rubbing her side, breathing through a quiet contraction. Or a cramp, he told himself. He looked at Vanessa. Sleek hair, flawless lips, a bite of worry at the corner of her mouth. "We'll go to the house," he said. "We'll find it there." Vanessa slipped her arm through his. "Of course we will." Sheila watched them cross the lot. Her eyes flicked to Marlowe. "Mrs. Kim, she said, using the name Eleanor always had. If you need a statement, I'll give one. Eleanor asked me to. To say what? Marlowe asked. Sheila drew in a careful breath. That the truth won't fit in anyone's pocket. The Ramirez home in Lake Forest had never warmed, even in summer. Too much glass, too much slate, as if Eleanor had commissioned a mausoleum by mistake. Now the foyer swam with coats and condolence. A catered spread sat untouched in the dining room. Deviled eggs, ham biscuits, miniature quiches no one would eat. Vanessa moved like a hostess in a magazine, guiding people to sleek chairs, explaining where the powder room was. She had chosen the black sheath dress that meant business and bereavement. At the edge of the living room, William watched the crowd assemble in concentric circles of loyalty and opportunism. Board members, foundation directors, an aunt from Madison with a purse that doubled as a filing cabinet. Marlowe arrived with a young associate and a thumb drive. She asked to use the media room. William led her down the hall past Eleanor's closed study. He fetched the key from the Chinese bowl in the kitchen, the one his mother used to pretend was for oranges. The study still held Eleanor's lemon hand lotion scent, her pens aligned like soldiers, her paperweight of fused glass. On the credenza, a rosary box sat open and empty. "Recognize this?" Marlowe asked Vanessa, who had followed them with a little gasp. "I don't spend time in dead women's desk drawers," Vanessa said, and then flinched, masking it as grief. "I only meant, I wouldn't know. We'll review the footage from the church," Marlowe said. "In the meantime, keep everyone here. The envelope is a codicil. Eleanor signed it 2 weeks ago." William's head snapped up. 2 weeks? "Yes. Witnessed, notarized, filed. The envelope contained a letter to accompany it." Marlowe's look softened, briefly. "It changes the trustee structure and other things." Vanessa set her hand on William's arm. "Changes?" she asked, bright and careful. "Surely nothing dramatic." "Dramatic," Marlowe said evenly, "is in the eye of the beneficiary." By the bay window, Sheila had found a chair near the radiator. The heat felt good against her lower back. She'd avoided this house since the divorce. The corners were filled with ghosts. A yellow mixing bowl she and Eleanor had used to make lemon cake on a rainy Sunday. The way light turned the hallway rug the color of tea in late afternoon. The first winter after she married William, she had put garlands on that banister and felt something like belonging. That was before the prenup renegotiation he'd sprung on her as a standard update, before Vanessa's soft laugh in conference rooms, before knowable cracks widened into canyons. William approached, awkward in his own home. For years their marriage had been a series of parallel agendas, his calendar and her patience, until the day patience quit like a long-suffering employee. "I didn't know you would come," he said. "Eleanor asked me," Sheila replied. She was kinder in the end than any of us deserved. He wanted to ask the question that had chased him all morning. "Is it mine?" But the words were a wound that needed the right room, the right light. Instead, he said, "You mentioned a promise." Sheila nodded. "To bring what she wrote into the room. To keep it from getting lost." "Nothing gets lost here," Vanessa said, arriving with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed one to Sheila, smile luminous. "We run a tight ship. Ships sink all the time," Sheila said, voice gentle, and took a sip. Marlowe reappeared. "We found it," she said. "On the footage. The envelope at the church. It was placed, and then it was not." "Who?" William asked, stomach dropping into a familiar freefall that had nothing to do with elevators and everything to do with his own blind spots. Marlowe looked at Vanessa first, then William. The camera was angled. All we can see is a dark sleeve and a hand with a very distinctive signet ring. "I'll ask guests to remain while we contact the police." Vanessa's fingers moved reflexively toward her left hand, bare except for a slim platinum band William had given her as a pre-engagement. She didn't wear a signet ring, but his cousin Darren did. So did the foundation chair. William stared at the mantel, where a portrait of Eleanor at 40 looked like she could step down and slap common sense into the room. He heard her voice. Family is a contract you can't tear up. He had torn plenty. Agreements, boundaries, the soft fibers of trust. Now the paper fibers lay somewhere, ink drying in the air. "Keep people here," Marlowe said again. "We'll read what I have of the codicil to the room. If the envelope isn't returned by then, I'll file an emergency motion." Sheila set her empty glass on a coaster. The baby shifted high beneath her ribs. She looked for a rare second at William, not as the man who had failed her, but as a man who might still choose. He thought of late nights in the old apartment over the deli they had loved before money bought a better place. He thought of the first time she'd laughed in that kitchen, head tipped back, a jam jar of daisies on the table. If redemption existed, he suspected it started with something as small as that, remembering the sound of someone you once loved and letting it matter. The house's powder room, just off the foyer, was the kind of place people disappeared to at wakes, emerging with composed faces. It had wallpaper like a field of muted peonies and a gilt mirror that could flatter a fever. Vanessa washed her hands too long, watching the water ripple. She wasn't a thief, she told her reflection. She was a protector. Eleanor had been a useful inconvenience, beloved and immovable. A codicil now, so soon, threatened everything Vanessa had built, from careful suggestion and immaculate timing. In her handbag, structured black leather, small enough to look polite, large enough to carry a future, sat a velvet envelope. She'd plucked it from the pew when William stood to speak, fingers steady, heart wild with the intoxicating clarity that came after panic. You act or you lose. The envelope wasn't the only copy. She wasn't stupid. But it could buy time. She dried her hands and stepped into the hall. Darren Ramirez, half drunk and already bitter, lounged against the console. His signet ring flashed on his right hand, a family crest bought with old money and new swagger. "Nice service," he drawled. "You should have cried more, sweetheart. People love tears." "Grief expresses itself in many ways," she said. He smirked. "So does ambition." Vanessa stared him down. Darren had once cornered her in a coat closet at a fundraiser with bourbon breath and flattery. She had sidestepped, as she sidestepped everything that did not serve the plan. He was useful now only as a silhouette that might take heat. In the living room, Marlowe called for attention. Guests arranged themselves, the chorus of chair legs scraping wood a brittle overture. "Eleanor executed a codicil," Marlowe said, voice carrying with courtroom grace. "It makes 3 main changes. First, the Foundation's voting shares will be placed into a family trust with 2 trustees, myself and 1 family member, designated by a sealed letter, likely the one currently missing. Second, a portion of Eleanor's personal assets will be redirected to a community impact fund, specifically targeted to women-owned small businesses in Cook and Lake counties. Third," she paused as if stepping over a threshold. "Third, the codicil removes the restraining clause that prevented any bequests to future descendants of a dissolved marriage." William felt the room tilt. His aunt whispered, "What does that mean?" Someone else hissed, "It means she changed her mind about cut-offs." Sheila lifted her chin. Vanessa felt the perimeter of her world contract like a fist. "Eleanor believed in evolution," Marlowe continued. "She believed people could become more than their mistakes." Her gaze found William, and then Sheila, a subtle axis drawn between them. The letter will specify the trustee designation and an accompanying statement of intent. Without it, we have to move forward with a presumption based on the statute and filings. I would prefer not to. Vanessa smiled in a way that photographed well. I'm sure this can all be handled discreetly. Families don't need courts when they have love. Families need courts when they have money, Darren muttered. Marlowe's associate entered from the hall and whispered in her ear. Marlowe's mouth hardened. The church confirmed. A hand with a signet ring removed the envelope. We'll be contacting the police. Gasps. A small dismayed, "Oh," from someone who collected Waterford crystal. Sheila stood. Her voice was calm. Then perhaps the person with the envelope could simply set it on the mantel, and we could all go back to our grief. No one moved. Across the rugs and legalities, William looked at Sheila's hands, tinged with dish soap softness from years of doing for herself what money could have paid someone else to do. He remembered her first pregnancy, how she'd folded tiny shirts with reverence, how she'd held one up to her cheek and laughed. The miscarriage had stolen more than a heartbeat. It had stolen language. He'd tried to fix it with logistics. She'd needed a hand over her mouth, catching sobs in the dark. Not a calendar invite for try again. Vanessa's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. Check your coat pocket. Stage left, camera in the sconce. She looked up sharply. The sconces that bracketed the mantel were antique brass. Cameras inside? Eleanor, you paranoid witch, she thought, and then felt shame coat her tongue. But this was no time for sentiment. She moved toward the foyer, casual, weaving through condolences. At the coat closet, she slipped inside. She reached into the pocket of her own coat and felt Velvet's mild resistance. She exhaled. Then a voice came from the doorway. "That's not yours," Sheila said. Vanessa turned, smile lacquered. "Everything in here belongs to the family." Sheila's gaze held hers, soft and fierce. "I thought we weren't doing closets anymore." Something like a laugh cracked through Vanessa's shell. She had underestimated Sheila, her steadiness, her refusal to be bait. "You don't understand what's at stake," Vanessa said, and for once her voice was honest. "I do," Sheila said. A contraction gathered low and bright. She breathed through it. A child's future, a family's name, a woman's dignity. They stood framed by coats and the smell of cedar. For a moment, Vanessa saw herself, as if through the house cameras, an actress caught mid-scene. She placed the envelope on the shelf. "You should know," she said, softer. "Eleanor was going to name you." Sheila blinked. As Vanessa's eyes flicked away. "Trustee, with Marlowe." She left the closet without touching the envelope again, heels clicking like punctuation. Sheila stared at the velvet and felt her heart kick against bone. She took one step and then another, carrying the envelope toward the living room, like a woman bringing bread to a hungry table. Marlowe opened the envelope at the mantel with the pomp of someone who understood both symbol and statute. The room leaned in. She read aloud, "To my family. If you are reading this, then I have done the thing I told myself I would never do. Change my mind publicly. I have come to believe that stubbornness is simply fear dressed in discipline. I have been afraid that my generosity would be abused, afraid that my choices would be mocked, afraid that my love would make me look weak. I do not want fear to make my last decisions. I name Sheila Bennett as co-trustee with Marlowe Kim. I name her not because she married my son, nor because she divorced him, but because she kept showing up for people who didn't always deserve it, including me. She is, in my estimation, the bravest kind of person, one who will tell the truth even when the truth is an unflattering color. As to money, A river that only feeds itself becomes a swamp. Send it outward. Watch what blooms. As to legacy, a family is not its press release. A family is its kitchen at 2 a.m. Be kind to the person rummaging for bread. As to the child, I hope will be born healthy. May you never learn that love must be earned. Eleanor, the room exhaled. Someone sniffled. Darren rolled his eyes and then, catching Marlowe's look, attempted contrition. Vanessa stood near the doorway like a portrait hung slightly crooked. William could not swallow for a full 5 seconds. The sentence about the child lodged inside him and pulsed. He looked at Sheila, but her eyes were on the paper. The letter made her feel as if the ground under her was finally the right material, rock instead of glass. Marlowe folded the letter carefully. There will be filings, she said, because there always were. But the letter is clear. The codicil stands. The police will likely want to know where the envelope went. Vanessa raised her hand like a schoolgirl who planned to ace the test by disarming the teacher. I moved it, she said. I panicked. I put it in the coat closet because I didn't want it to get mishandled. I should have brought it to you immediately. I'm sorry, gasps. A handful of gratified looks. People who hated her now had a hook. Marlowe studied her. You'll put that in a statement? Yes, Vanessa said. Her voice did not shake. William felt something snap. A thread between the person he told himself he was and the person he had actually been with Vanessa. Complicit, distracted, willing to let charm do the work of conscience. Why? He asked her, genuinely. Vanessa's face rearranged itself into grief. Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid your mother's final act would undo everything we've built. We? William repeated. She held his gaze. For once, no performance. Yes, William. We. Sheila's hand went to the back of a chair. The contraction built and crested like a wave. Her breath stuttered. Marlowe noticed first. Are you all right? I'm fine, Sheila said. Lied. And then the fine snapped in two. A sharp sound escaped before she could catch it. The room brightened at the edges. William moved without thinking. She needs a hospital, he said, already reaching for his coat. Now, I can drive her, Vanessa said automatically. Marlowe stepped in. No, William will. Sheila wanted to say she didn't need him. That was the old reflex. Self-sufficiency spiked with pride. But the car keys looked heavy in her pocket, and the cold outside promised to bite. She nodded, slow. Okay. The house shifted, as if a stage crew had changed sets. Guests murmured condolences, contact cards pressed into hands, casseroles retrieved. William guided Sheila out into the snow. The world smelled like iron and pine. For 2 blocks they said nothing, breath fogging. When the car heater finally caught, Sheila turned her face toward it and closed her eyes. Is it mine? He asked, because there was no right room, only this one. Her eyes opened. She had planned to say, it doesn't matter. She had planned to say, labels are for jars, not infants. Instead, honesty came. Yes, the car hummed. Outside, Lake Michigan shoved itself against the shore. William's hand tightened on the wheel. Okay, he said, and the word felt like a vow stripped to its studs. Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital was a quiet hive of urgent kindness. In the triage room, a nurse named Yvette checked Sheila's blood pressure and made a joke about winter babies arriving with scarves. Sheila smiled, grateful for the ordinary warmth of it, the way nurses had of placing humans in manageable categories without erasing their complexity. William stood at the window, looking at a parking lot the color of pewter. He had thought wealth could build a moat around pain. It could not. Pain walked on water. 34 weeks, Yvette said, noting Sheila's chart. Contractions irregular. Hydrate and monitor. She looked at William. You the dad? Sheila answered for him. Yes. It came out easier than she'd expected. Then drink this too, Yvette said, handing William a paper cup of hospital coffee. Dad's faint and they're heavier. She left with a wink that somehow unclenched the air. When they were alone, William said, Thank you. For what? Sheila asked. For not lying about me. I got tired of lying about myself, she said. It's contagious. He sat. The vinyl chair sighed. I'm sorry, he said. And if there'd been a ledger on the wall, years of late nights and missed dinners and clipped tones would have started marking themselves paid. I thought making money for us was the same as making us. It wasn't. Sheila looked at her hands. I should have said what I needed with words instead of silence. He laughed, small and wounded. We're a great pair. You went quiet, I went louder, and neither of us heard anything. What now? She asked. Now I ask what you want, he said. He had been trained to make offers so appealing that no one remembered to negotiate. This felt different. This felt like showing an open palm and waiting. I want peace, she said. For me. For this baby. Legal peace. Emotional peace. The kind you can sleep in. He nodded. Okay, we'll build that. And I want you to call Vanessa, Sheila added. Tell her the truth. You owe her that, even if, especially if, this ends everything for you too. He winced. You're an unusually decent person. I'm someone who doesn't want to be lied about, she said. It's different. He called Vanessa. She answered on the second ring. Is she okay? She asked, startling him with genuine concern. Dehydration, he said. Preterm labor scare. The baby. It's mine. Silence creaked. Then, okay, Vanessa said. Okay, I'm sorry, he added, because there was nothing else. I know, she replied, and sounded tired. I'll send a car for myself. I'm leaving the house. Marlowe wants statements and the police want ring photos. The ring wasn't yours, he said. No, she agreed, but the decision was. Vanessa, he began. Don't, she said, not unkindly. Go be a father. When he hung up, Sheila watched the line of his mouth soften. She's stronger than I gave her credit for, Sheila said. She's many things, he replied. Strong is one of them. Yvette returned with water and a plan. They would keep Sheila overnight to monitor. Stress, she said, clipping a monitor to Sheila's belly, is an excellent liar. It tells your body there's a tiger in the pew when there is only grief. Sheila smiled. You should put that on a card. As monitors beeped their calm metronome, William told Sheila about Eleanor's letter. Sheila told William about the afternoon she'd spent with Eleanor in late September, how they'd made lemon cake and argued about forgiveness. She said I forgive too quick. I said she forgave too slow. She forgave, William said, in the end. Forgiveness isn't the end, Sheila replied, eyes on the monitor. It's a key to a gate. Then you've still got to walk. Marlowe worked like a woman whose sleep had been repossessed. She took statements, pulled camera footage, called in favors from a detective who owed her $2.50. In the footage from the church, the sconce camera showed Vanessa in the coat closet with the envelope. Her confession held. Another camera showed Darren loitering near the pew, hand hovering as if auditioning for a crime he did not quite commit. Marlowe called Darren to the study. He arrived drunk with indignation. You can't treat me like a suspect, he said. I can treat you like a relative, Marlowe answered, which is worse. She slid a set of photos across the desk. The signet ring, the sleeve, a posture that might belong to any man who had been taught the world was furniture. Darren blustered, then deflated. It wasn't me. I thought about it. Everyone thought about it. Vanessa just did it. She confessed, Marlowe said. And now she'll live with that. The codicil stands, Darren. The trust will be difficult for men like you. You'll need receipts." He glared. "I have receipts." "Then you'll be fine," she said, and dismissed him with the gentle brutality of a woman who had done this too long to waste time. At the hospital, William spent the night in the vinyl chair and woke each time a nurse murmured. He stared at the ceiling and thought about what it would mean to make room. In his calendar, in his home, in his heart. Money took up space. So did regret. So did hope. The trick, he realized, was not adding but subtracting until the right things had room. In the morning, Sheila's contractions had settled into the background hum of a body working at the speed of its own wisdom. A resident cleared her to go home with rest and a list of foods that sounded like a kindergarten pantry. On the way to the elevator, they passed a newborn behind glass. The tiny mouth opened in a silent yawn. Sheila's breath hitched. In the lobby, reporters flickered like moths. News had leaked. Headlines would love them. Billionaire's pregnant ex at funeral. Missing will. William led Sheila through the side exit to the parking garage. He had never been good at side doors. This felt like learning to navigate the world without a brass key. At home, her home, not his. Sheila sank into the couch with a blanket and a list of instructions from Yvette. Eat, drink, sleep. Laugh at one sitcom rerun daily. William set a grocery sack on the counter. He'd bought every ginger ale in the store and came back with the diet kind by accident. "I'll make tea," he said, eager to be useful. She watched him in her small kitchen, where plants did better than people. "You can go," she said, not unkindly. "I know you have 100 fires." "I have one fire," he answered. "It's here." He looked around. Photos on the fridge, her sister's kids, a Polaroid of Sheila holding a lemon cake in a thrifted apron. "Can I fix the door latch?" he asked. "It catches." "Yes," she said, surprised by how easily yes arrived. As he bent with a screwdriver and a new humility, his phone vibrated with a message from Marlowe. "Emergency hearing today, 3 p.m., probate court. We need you and Sheila both. Vanessa, too." He glanced at Sheila. "Court," he said. "You up for it?" She set down her tea. "I guess we walk." The courtroom in downtown Chicago smelled like dust and damp wood. It had the sad echo of a school gym. Judge Armanda Velasquez presided with an arched eyebrow that could lift a boulder. On one side sat Marlowe with William and Sheila. On the other, a foundation attorney whose cufflinks looked like they'd never seen daylight. Vanessa sat behind them, alone, her posture precise and freshly human. Marlowe spoke first. She laid out the codicil, the letter, the attempted interference. She did not call Vanessa a thief. She called her a panicked party, which was both accurate and merciful. The foundation attorney argued that Eleanor's mind had been in decline and that late changes bore scrutiny. Marlowe produced video of Eleanor 2 days before signing, lecturing a board member into dignified silence. The judge watched for 2 minutes and blew out a breath. "If that's decline," she said, "I can only aspire." Then came the sealed letters effect, trustee designation, and the removal of the restraining clause. The attorney sighed and asked for a temporary injunction. Judge Velasquez denied it, with the satisfaction of someone ignoring a request to ruin a Tuesday. "And the interference?" the judge asked. "Is the state pursuing charges?" A detective rose. "At this time, we have a confession from Ms. Pierce. Given the property was returned and the circumstances, funeral, heightened emotion, the state will hold on charging pending formal complaint from the estate." Marlowe turned to Sheila, whose hand had moved to her stomach as if protecting a secret orchard. "Miss Bennett?" Sheila stood. Her voice did not tremble. "I don't want charges. I want order." "That's a first," the judge muttered, not unkindly. "What do you want, Miss Pierce?" she asked. Vanessa rose, chin high. "I want to apologize to the court, to the family, and to Ms. Bennet. I did a stupid thing because I was afraid. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," the judge said. "Now, to the matter of the trust. The court recognizes the codicil and the trustee appointments as valid. Ms. Kim, Ms. Bennet, congratulations and condolences. It's a messy job." Afterward, in the marble hall where voices ricocheted, Vanessa approached Sheila. Up close, without the audience, she looked younger. "I meant it," she said. "I know," Sheila answered. "Here's what I need from you. No leaks, no back-channel gossip. If anyone asks, you tell them what you told the judge." Vanessa lifted a hand as if to swear. "Okay. And thank you," Sheila added, surprising herself, "for putting the envelope back." Vanessa's laugh was a single bright sound. "I wish I could say it was conscience. It was a text from an anonymous guardian angel telling me the house had eyes." She glanced at Marlowe, who smiled the ghost of a smile. "Your mother-in-law was more thorough than the CIA. Ex, Sheila corrected gently. Then her eyes softened. Maybe not for long. She surprised herself again. Or maybe forever. Either way, we'll be kind. Vanessa nodded. "Be kind," she echoed, and the word sounded like a new language she could learn if she practiced. William joined them, tentative. "Sheila," he said, "do you want to come by the house later? Eleanor's lemon bowl is yours. You used it more than she did." Sheila glanced at Marlowe. "We have trustee duties," Marlowe said cheerfully, like reviewing a mountain of paperwork and saying no a lot. "But after that, yes," Vanessa stepped back. "I'll pick up my things. I'll send someone for the rest next week." William reached out, touched her elbow, a benediction without promise. "Take what you need," he said. "We'll settle fairly." "Imagine that," Vanessa said softly. "Fairness." She turned and walked into the late afternoon light that turned the granite columns the color of old honey. 2 weeks later, when sorrow had settled into the corners of the house like dust, Marlowe and Sheila met in Eleanor's study with stacks of files. They learned the language of the trust, disbursements, audits, oversight so granular it might as well be embroidery. They made small, firm decisions that would ripple outward into food trucks and daycare grants and women replacing broken furnaces. In a bottom drawer, Sheila found a brown accordion folder labeled in Eleanor's clean hand. April, private. Inside lay 2 things. The first, a printed email from William to Eleanor, sent after the miscarriage years ago, in which he wrote, "I don't know how to fix this. If money could do it, I would write a check with the whole world on the payee line. Tell me how to be a son who doesn't make you ashamed, and a husband who doesn't make her grieve alone." Eleanor had replied, "You can't fix grief. You can carry groceries and listen. Start there." The second item, a bank statement showing monthly transfers from Eleanor to someone named Alicia Gomez, the woman who had cleaned the Ramirez house for 20 years, each note reading, "For the boys' braces, for the exam, for the deposit." There was a sticky note attached. "No one gets rich alone." Sheila sat with the paper, the way one sits with a truth that rearranges a room. When William joined them later, she showed him the folder. He read the email and lowered himself into a chair, as if sitting down was an apology. He traced his mother's handwriting with a finger. "She must have been tired of my speeches," he said. "She wanted me to carry groceries." "You're carrying a lot now," Sheila said. He met her gaze. "I want to carry with you." They talked, carefully, like people walking back into a house that had burned and been rebuilt. They did not pretend the fire hadn't happened. They admired the new beams. They named the scorch marks. That night, in her own little kitchen, Sheila thought about the story she had told herself for years. That she had left because she was small and he was big, because power imbalance was a beast you couldn't train, only escape. She realized a more precise truth. She had left because the power was misused. What she wanted now was not to flatten power, but to bend it toward gentleness and accountability. Her phone pinged, a photo from Vanessa, a potted rosemary plant on a windowsill. For your kitchen, think of it as an apology that is also a herb. Sheila laughed out loud, texted back a heart. Across town, Vanessa sat in a one-bedroom with good light. She had taken a job at a non-profit that taught financial literacy to women starting over. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman recalibrating. Her signet ring text to herself, "Don't be that again," glowed on a post-it above her desk. Spring arrived with sidewalk chalk and mud. The foundation board gathered in a high room overlooking the river. New trustees, Sheila and Marlowe, sat at the head, Eleanor's chair empty but present. William presented without flourish. He talked about measurements that mattered. Childhood asthma rates near the factories the foundation had once ignored, graduation rates rising when daycare stipends kicked in. He did not talk about market cap. When an old guard member tried to bully Sheila into delaying the community fund while we recalibrate our optics, she placed her hand flat on the table and said, "We're not calibrating optics, we're changing outcomes." Marlowe hid a smile. William looked at Sheila the way you look at a lighthouse from a ship that once believed itself self-sufficient. 2 days later, Sheila went into labor. It was a Tuesday. The air smelled like rain on warm stone. In the delivery room, Yvette, God bless her, appeared like a recurring character in a series you hope never gets cancelled. "We're doing this," she said. "You ready?" "Ready," Sheila said, and meant it. William stood by her side, learning the complicated skill of being present without trying to manage. When panic rose, he breathed. When fear whispered, he said the simplest prayer he had, "Please." When the baby arrived, red and outraged and perfect, he cried in a way that surprised him because he didn't do that, and then realized he did now. They named the baby Lila Eleanor. Lila as in night and softness. Eleanor as in steel and lemon cake. Later, when the room went still, Sheila watched William hold their daughter. The way he looked at Lila made Sheila think of ocean floor photographs. New life clustered around shockingly hot vents. The harshest places grew strange gardens. On the third day, Marlowe visited with flowers and a file. "You don't have to read this now," she said, "but when you're ready." It was the final accounting of the estate, attached, a letter from Eleanor to Lila. "I hope you grow into hands that lift more than they grasp. And I hope you forgive me for all the ways I didn't learn that sooner." Sheila cried because postpartum hormones and also because love. Vanessa came by the next week with the rosemary plant, an awkward smile and a gift, a stack of freezer meals labeled with cooking times. "I learned these from the non-profit kitchen," she said, pride warming her voice. She held Lila for a minute, marveling at fingers that looked like exclamation points. "We're okay," Sheila told her quietly. "I know," Vanessa said. "I plan to be too." Lila woke hungry at 2:03 a.m. The kitchen light glowed butter-soft. William warmed a bottle while Sheila leaned against the counter and watched the steam ghost the window. Outside, the city was a dark animal breathing. "She sounds like a tiny opera singer," he said. "She'll grow into a voice," Sheila murmured, bone-tired and happy. "Remember Eleanor's line?" he asked. "About the kitchen at 2 a.m. being kind." Sheila smiled. "We're here." He handed her the bottle and sat, close enough for his knee to brush hers. They didn't talk about remarriage. They didn't draft a new press release for the family. They fed a baby in the quiet house and listened to the radiator knock like an old friend. When Lila slept again, they opened the back door. The spring night smelled like wet dirt and something electric. On the porch, a potted rosemary from Vanessa sat sturdy. William reached for Sheila's hand. She let him have it. In the months that followed, order did not mean ease. There were nights Lila screamed, and days lawyers emailed, and mornings the trust required the kind of yes that cost. There were also afternoons when a woman from Waukegan brought a tray of tamales to the foundation office and cried because the microgrant meant her shop did not close, and evenings when William put his phone in a drawer and took Lila to the park, and Sundays when Sheila baked lemon cake in a bowl that once belonged to a difficult, beloved woman who had changed her mind just in time. At the first board retreat since Eleanor's death, they met not at a resort, but in a community center gym painted the color of toothpaste. The coffee was bad. The chairs were worse. They wrote on butcher paper and took bathroom breaks when mothers needed to pump. At lunch, William gave a speech that wasn't a speech. "We're here because money can either feed itself or the neighborhood," he said. We know which one Eleanor chose at the end. After the meeting, Sheila found him by the vending machine, feeding it dollar bills that kept spitting back. "Machines like you," she teased. "They preferred me when I was all numbers," he said. "People seem to like me better now." He pressed the selection again. The machine gave up a bag of pretzels, like a lesson in persistence. They ate them on the steps. He looked at her in that easy way that had returned, not like a man waiting for a verdict, but like a man building a kitchen at 2 a.m. "I'm ready," he said softly. "When you are." She thought about contracts you can't tear up. She thought about keys and gates and walking. She thought about the tiny body upstairs at daycare and the rosemary on the sill and the lemon cake in the oven that would be devoured by a room full of people who'd never imagined the hours that went into the crumbs. "Soon," she said, and kissed his shoulder. "Let's keep walking." They did. In the end, the story didn't make headlines, because the good stories rarely do. A baby slept. A woman who had once been underestimated managed a trust like a lighthouse. A man who had confused power with care learned where to put his hands. And another woman took a job that paid less, but made more sense. And, one day, taught a class where a mother of 3 realized she could open a savings account with $10 and a dozen brave decisions. Eleanor's letter sits framed above the kitchen desk, the one about kitchens at 2 a.m. There are nights when exhaustion wins and dinner is crackers and cheese. There are mornings when the trust meeting runs long and daycare calls anyway. There are choices to forgive and choices never to repeat. But the arc bends, not because apologies are magic, but because people decide to be kind at inconvenient hours. If this story moved you, I'd love for you to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more women find stories that feel like their own, messy, brave, and beautifully real. The flash of paparazzi bulbs was a drug, and Ethan Whittaker was hopelessly addicted. Standing under the gilded arches of the Grand Palais in Paris, his arm wrapped possessively around the waist of a woman who was not his wife, he felt invincible. The air, thick with expensive perfume and ambition, was his to breathe. He was a king in a foreign court, his mistress, Sierra Blake, the glittering jewel on his arm. He had told his pregnant wife, Amelia Davenport, he was on a solo business retreat in Geneva, a necessary evil to close a deal. He had no idea the deal was a lie. The retreat was a fiction, and the woman he'd left behind in their quiet New York brownstone wasn't just waiting for him. She was waiting for the perfect moment to detonate the gilded, beautiful bomb she had built right under his feet. Ethan Whittaker didn't just walk into a room. He conquered it. At 38, He was the architect of his own universe, the CEO and founder of Whitaker Analytics, a data mining behemoth that had made him a billionaire before his 35th birthday. He was a man forged in the crucible of Wall Street ambition and Silicon Valley disruption, and he wore his success like a bespoke suit, perfectly tailored, intimidating, and unapologetically expensive. His life was a curated collection of victories, the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the fleet of cars gleaming in his climate-controlled garage, and the wife who was by all accounts his greatest acquisition. Amelia Davenport was not like the other women in their circle. She wasn't a socialite who laundered her calendar through philanthropy, who chaired committees for clout, or a former model clinging to the vestiges of her youth. She was quiet. Inherited wealth from the Davenport textile dynasty gave her a grace and security that new money like Ethan's could only emulate, never truly possess. She moved with understated elegance, her intelligence a gentle, steady light rather than a blinding glare. Ethan had loved that about her. It was a perfect contrast to his own abrasive brilliance. She was his sanctuary, the calm port in his relentless storm of ambition. But lately, the sanctuary had started to feel like a museum. Their conversations, once vibrant and challenging, had dwindled to domestic logistics. Her pregnancy, now in its 5th month, should have been a source of shared joy. Instead, for Ethan, it had become another box ticked on the checklist of a successful life. It also made Amelia tired, more withdrawn. She had given up her position as a senior curator at the Met to focus on her health, and Ethan saw it as a retreat into a world he couldn't monetize or dominate. "What did you do today, darling?" he'd ask, loosening his tie as he strode into their cavernous home. "I was researching Renaissance weaving techniques," she might reply, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop. "It's fascinating how they used sumac and indigo to create—" "Fantastic," Ethan would cut in, already pouring himself a Macallan 25. "Marcus Ellison is trying to poach my head of AI. Can you believe the audacity?" Her world of art, history, and culture had become, in his mind, a series of quaint, unlucrative hobbies. She was nesting. It was natural, he told himself. But it was also boring. And Ethan Whitaker hated being bored. Sierra Blake was the antidote to boredom. At 24, she was a supernova of ambition, an Instagram influencer whose currency was sculpted abs, strategically worn bikinis, and an unquenchable thirst for the limelight. Ethan had met her at a tech conference in Miami. She hadn't been a speaker. She'd been hired to add atmosphere at the VIP after-party. She approached him, not with the deference he was used to, but with a bold, appraising look. She didn't care about his data algorithms. She cared about the gravitational pull of his wealth. Their affair was a shot of adrenaline. Clandestine dinners at restaurants, so new they hadn't been reviewed yet. Expensive gifts, a Cartier bracelet here, a private jet to a Caribbean weekend there. It was the thrill of the illicit, the ego boost of being desired by a woman half his age who represented the vibrant, vapid, intoxicating pulse of modern celebrity. Sierra was everything Amelia wasn't. Loud, demanding, and utterly transactional. With her, he wasn't a husband. He was a benefactor, a king. "Paris Fashion Week is coming up," Sierra purred one evening, scrolling through her phone as they lay in the silk sheets of a boutique hotel suite he kept for just these occasions. "The Aure show is the one to get into. It's impossible. Everyone is dying to see what Adrian Cole does next." Ethan had never heard of Aure or its designer. "Consider it done," he'd said, the challenge invigorating him. Pulling strings was his favorite pastime. A few calls to his PR firm, a charitable donation to the right cultural fund, and 2 front-row tickets were secured. It was a demonstration of his power, a gift he could lay at her feet. "I can't believe it, Ethan," she shrieked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We're going to be front row. Me, at ore." "I have to be in Geneva for a few days," he told Amelia that night, carefully avoiding her gaze as he packed a suitcase. "Finalizing the merger with the Swiss data firm. It's unavoidable." Amelia looked up from her book, her expression placid. A small, knowing sadness flickered in her eyes, a look he had become adept at ignoring. "Of course, Ethan. Work comes first. Will it be long?" 3-4 days at most, he said, the lie slipping out with practiced ease. "I'll be back before you know it. You just rest. Take care of yourself and our little one." He placed a perfunctory kiss on her forehead, the scent of her lavender and chamomile soap, a stark contrast to the heady amber perfume that clung to him from his afternoon with Sierra. He felt a pang of something. Guilt, maybe, or a faint echo of the man he used to be. But he pushed it down. Geneva was the story. Paris was the reality, and reality was far more exciting. After he left, the silence of the brownstone settled around Amelia. For a moment, she allowed her placid mask to fall. Her hand went to her gently swelling stomach, a gesture both protective and resolute. She picked up her phone, not to track his flight to Geneva, but to open a secure messaging app. A new message popped up from a contact named AC. "The final fitting was a success. The collection is breathtaking. Are you ready for this?" Amelia's fingers flew across the screen, her response swift and certain. "He just left. He thinks he's going to Geneva. He has no idea he's flying straight into our theater. I was born ready, Adrian." She closed the app and opened another. This one, a banking portal. She scrolled to a line item from 6 months ago. A wire transfer of $8 million, routed through a series of shell corporations before landing in the accounts of a struggling visionary but nearly bankrupt Parisian fashion house. The recipient, Maison Ore. Amelia Davenport, the quiet, pregnant wife with her quaint hobbies, closed her laptop. She had her own trip to prepare for, and unlike her husband, she had no reason to lie about her destination. She was going to Paris to check on her investment. The private jet descended through the Parisian clouds like a silver dart. Below, the city sprawled out in a tapestry of slate-grey roofs and shimmering lights. Sierra pressed her face to the window, capturing the descent for her 2 million Instagram followers. The caption was already drafted in her head. "Touchdown in the city of love with my mystery man. PFWW jet set life. Blessed." The mystery man conceit was Ethan's rule, a thin veil of discretion he insisted upon. It only added to her allure, she reasoned, making her followers speculate wildly. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," she breathed, turning to Ethan. Ethan barely glanced out of the window. He was on a call, his voice sharp and commanding. "No, the Q3 projections are soft. We need to be more aggressive in the emerging markets. Schedule a board meeting for Monday morning. I don't care that I'll be jet-lagged. Make it happen." He ended the call and finally offered Sierra a self-satisfied smile. "Sorry about that. The Empire never sleeps." The line was meant to impress, and it did. To Sierra, his power was the most attractive thing about him. It was the key that unlocked this world for her. Their arrival was seamless. A black Mercedes S-Class whisked them from the private airfield at Le Bourget to the Hotel Plaza Athénée on the prestigious Avenue Montaigne. The lobby was a symphony of marble, crystal, and the hushed tones of the world's wealthiest citizens. Their suite was a marvel of Parisian opulence. A balcony offered a picture-perfect view of the Eiffel Tower, which Sierra immediately began to exploit for a photo shoot, cycling through a suitcase full of designer outfits Ethan had bought for her. He watched her, a glass of champagne in hand, feeling a sense of profound satisfaction. This was life. This was success made manifest. He was providing this fantasy for her, and her adoration was his reward. "The Ore show is tomorrow night," she said, striking a pose in a crimson dress. "I need to look perfect. This is my chance to get noticed by the big brands, maybe even get a real campaign." "You'll be the most beautiful woman there," Ethan said, his voice a low murmur. "I'll make sure of it." Meanwhile, across the city, in the less ostentatious but equally chic Saint-Germain-des-Prés district, Amelia Davenport was having a very different Parisian experience. She had arrived 2 days earlier on a commercial flight, first class, but without the fanfare. She checked into a discreet 5-star boutique hotel, Le Bristol, under her maiden name. Her days were not filled with photo shoots and champagne, but with quiet, focused work. Her suite had been converted into a makeshift command center. Fabric swatches, lighting plots, and seating charts were spread across a grand mahogany table. Standing beside her was Adrian Cole, the creative genius behind Ore. He was a man in his late 40s with kind, intense eyes and perpetually ink-stained fingers. He looked at Amelia not with the deference of an employee, but with the deep, abiding respect of a co-conspirator. "The final walk-through is tonight," he said, his voice lending a musical quality to his words. "The music, the lights, the choreography, it's all coming together. It is our best work, Amelia. Your belief has unleashed everything." 6 months ago, Adrian had been on the verge of losing his atelier. The fashion world loved his artistry, but his lack of business acumen had left him vulnerable. Critics praised his vision, but the banks were calling in his loans. He had refused to compromise, to sell out to a major conglomerate that would have diluted his brand into a mass-market commodity. Then Amelia had appeared. She hadn't come as a bored billionaire's wife looking for a vanity project. She came with a meticulous business plan. She had studied his work, his finances, his potential. She saw what the conglomerates missed. That true luxury wasn't about logos, it was about soul. She invested not just her money, but her intellect. She helped him restructure the business, secure new suppliers, and plan a relaunch that would shake the industry. All on one condition. Her involvement was to remain an absolute secret until she decided otherwise. She was the ghost in the machine, the silent partner whose name appeared on no official documents, only on the private trust that owned the company. "How are you feeling?" Adrian asked, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "All this stress. It cannot be good for the baby." Amelia placed a hand on her stomach. "He's calm," she said with a small smile. "I think he likes the hustle. He's a Davenport, after all. We build things." Her smile faded slightly. "Have you confirmed the seating?" Adrian nodded, tapping a specific spot on the digital chart projected onto the wall. "Row A, seats 12 and 13, as requested, directly in the sightline of the main runway exit. They will have a perfect view. And the photographers, the key ones, have been briefed. They know something big is happening at the finale. They are expecting a surprise celebrity cameo. They will be ready." "Good," Amelia said, her voice turning to steel. "Nothing can be left to chance." That evening, a twist of fate nearly unraveled the entire plan. Amelia and her best friend, Penelope Hart, a sharp-witted corporate lawyer who had flown in to support her, decided to have a quiet dinner at L'Avenue, a chic restaurant just a stone's throw from Ethan's hotel. They sat at a discreet table inside, enjoying the relative anonymity. As they were finishing their main course, the restaurant's doors swung open. A wave of murmurs and subtle glances swept through the room. Ethan Whittaker had arrived, and on his arm was Sierra Blake, resplendent in a shimmering silver dress. Penelope's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. "Amelia," she whispered, eyes wide, "don't look now." But Amelia had already seen them. Her heart gave a painful lurch. It was one thing to know about the affair, to see pictures, to plan her revenge from a distance. It was another to see it in the flesh, the proprietary way he held Sierra's arm, the brilliant false smile he flashed at the maître d'œil, the way Sierra basked in the reflected glory of his presence. A wave of raw, primitive hurt washed over her, so potent it almost took her breath away. For a terrifying second, she thought Ethan saw her. His eyes swept the room, and their gazes almost met. But his attention snagged on a rival tech CEO sitting near the front, Marcus Ellison, and he moved toward him, all glad-handing charisma and competitive energy. Amelia ducked her head, her hair falling like a curtain to shield her face. "Let's go," she said, her voice tight. "Now." Penelope threw some euros on the table, and they slipped out a side entrance, melting into the Parisian night. As they walked briskly down the street door, the cold air a balm on Amelia's burning cheeks, Penelope put a comforting arm around her. "Are you okay?" Amelia took a deep, shuddering breath, composing herself. The flicker of hurt was rapidly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "I'm fine," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "In fact, I'm better than fine. He just reminded me exactly why I'm doing this." She hailed a taxi, her posture once again erect and rigid. The hunter had just gotten a glimpse of her prey, and it had only sharpened her appetite for the chase. The day of the Ore show dawned with an electric tension that hummed through Paris. For Sierra, it felt like her coronation day. She woke to a breakfast of champagne and macarons delivered by a white-gloved butler. Ethan had already arranged for a team, a hairstylist and makeup artist, to come to their suite. "I want to look iconic," Sierra instructed them, showing a mood board on her iPad filled with images of supermodels and A-list actresses. Chic, but also sexy. Effortless, but like I spent hours on it. Ethan watched the transformation from an armchair, fielding business calls and feeling a swelling pride. He was the great enabler, the man who made fantasy a reality. Sierra preening in front of the mirror was a testament to his influence. He'd even tried to leverage his status further. "My PR people are telling me our seats are A12 and 13, he'd said to Sierra earlier. "Good, but not the best. The center seats, 1 through 5, are usually for the Anna Wintours of the world. I made a call to the event organizers, tried to get us moved up. It's a matter of respect." He had been uncharacteristically rebuffed. The response from Ore's team had been polite but firm. The seating chart was final and had been personally approved by the designer. No exceptions. It was a minor annoyance, a small scratch on his otherwise perfect day. But it bothered him. Ethan Whitaker was not a man who was told no. "It doesn't matter, baby," Sierra said, sensing his irritation. "We're in the front row. That's all anyone will see in the pictures. And once they see my face, they won't be looking at anyone else." Her confidence was a balm to his ego. She was right. It was a minor detail. The important thing was being there, being seen. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Amelia. "Hope the meetings in Geneva are going well. Thinking of you. XO." A fresh wave of guilt, stronger this time, washed over him. He pictured her alone in New York, her life on hold while she waited for their baby, while he was here living this dazzling lie. He typed a quick reply. "Going great. Very productive. Miss you. Be home soon." The lie tasted like acid. He pushed the feeling down again, harder this time. He would make it up to her. He would buy her a necklace, something exquisite. He'd be a better husband when he got back. But tonight was for him. Tonight was for Sierra. Across town, the atmosphere in Amelia's suite was one of quiet, focused intensity. There was no glam squad, no champagne. Amelia, dressed in simple black trousers and a silk blouse, stood before a full-length mirror. Penelope stood beside her, holding up a single garment. It was the final piece from the Auré collection, an item so secret it hadn't even been in the main studio. It was a coat, but to call it a coat was like calling the Sistine Chapel a painted ceiling. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet, so dark it was almost black. The cut was architectural, with strong shoulders and a flowing line designed to drape elegantly over her pregnant form, accentuating it rather than hiding it. The lining was the true secret, woven from a silk thread infused with real silver, a technique Amelia had discovered in her research, which shimmered with an ethereal lunar glow whenever it caught the light. It was a garment that spoke of power, mystery, and unapologetic femininity. "Adrian has outdone himself," Penelope breathed, her lawyerly composure momentarily forgotten. "It's a suit of armor, Amelia. A beautiful velvet suit of armor." Amelia ran her hand over the fabric. "It's a statement," she corrected softly. "It says, I am not a victim. I am the creator. I am the mother, and I am the boss." Adrian arrived not with the frenetic energy of a designer on show day, but with a zen-like calm. He looked at Amelia in the coat and simply nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Spare," he whispered. "It is you." They went over the plan one last time. Adrian would walk the runway at the end of the show to take his bow, as was tradition, but then he would signal for a microphone. He would speak about the rebirth of his brand, about the secret visionary who made it possible. And then he would introduce her. Amelia would step out from the wings, walk to the center of the runway, and take her place in the spotlight she had built for herself. "Are you nervous?" Adrian asked. Amelia looked at her reflection. She saw the quiet wife Ethan had left behind, but she also saw the Davenport heiress, the shrewd investor, and the soon-to-be mother. They were all merging into one formidable woman. "I'm not nervous," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm ready. Let's go give them a show they'll never forget." As dusk fell over Paris, two cars made their way toward the Grand Palais. One was a gleaming Mercedes, carrying a billionaire and his mistress, both buzzing with anticipation for the spectacle they were about to witness. The other was a discreet black Citroën, carrying a pregnant wife and her designer, both filled with a quiet resolve for the spectacle they were about to create. The battle lines had been drawn. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. The interior of the Grand Palais had been transformed. Where once there was a vast, empty hall, Adrian Cole had created an enchanted forest at midnight. Towering skeletal trees, sculpted from black steel, reached toward the glass ceiling. The runway was a winding path of polished obsidian that snaked through the trees, and a low-hanging mist clung to the floor, lit from below with a soft blue light. The atmosphere was dramatic, ethereal, and intensely beautiful. It was a world away from the bright, sterile, white runways of most shows. Ethan and Sierra found their seats, A12 and A13. Ethan's earlier annoyance returned as he saw their position was not central, but off to the side near the point where the models would exit the runway. They had a clear view, but it felt peripheral. He saw his rival, Marcus Ellison, seated dead center, and gave him a curt, professional nod. "Oh my God, Ethan, look," Sierra whispered, eyes wide as she scanned the front row. A-list actresses, rival designers, influential editors. It was a who's who of the fashion world. She was breathing the same rarefied air. Her phone was already out, discreetly snapping photos. This is it. This is everything. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A single haunting cello note echoed through the space, and the show began. The first model emerged from the mist, wearing a gown that seemed woven from moonlight and shadows. The collection, titled Nocturne, was a masterpiece. It was a departure from Adrian's previous, more colourful work. This was darker, more powerful, more mature. There were tailored suits in charcoal grey with razor-sharp shoulders, flowing dresses in deep indigos and burgundies, coats that wrapped the models like protective cocoons. The fabrics were exquisite, velvets, heavy silks, and a unique shimmering wool that seemed to drink the light. Even Ethan, whose knowledge of fashion was limited to price tags and brand recognition, was impressed. This wasn't just clothing. It was art. It was power. "He's a genius," he murmured, genuinely captivated. Sierra was mesmerized, her influencer brain calculating the viral potential of every single look. Each piece was a statement, a future magazine cover, a red carpet moment waiting to happen. This show was going to be legendary, and she was here, witnessing it. The collection unfolded, look after stunning look. The music swelled, a symphony of strings and melancholic piano that perfectly matched the clothes. The audience was rapt, a sea of silent, upturned faces. This was more than a fashion show. It was a transcendent experience. The finale began. The models walked the runway one last time in a stunning procession, a river of dark, shimmering beauty flowing through the enchanted forest. As the last model disappeared into the mist, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. The lights came up slightly. A spotlight found a lone figure emerging from the wings. It was Adrian Cole. He looked overwhelmed, his eyes shining with tears as he took in the standing ovation. He walked the length of the runway, blowing kisses, hands pressed to his heart. He was a man reborn, a visionary vindicated. He stopped at the head of the runway, right in front of the center seats. The applause began to die down as he held up a hand. An assistant rushed out and gave him a microphone. This was unusual. Designers took a bow. They didn't give speeches. A buzz of curiosity went through the room. Ethan leaned toward Sierra. "A bit dramatic, isn't it?" "Shh," she said, utterly captivated. Adrian took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly but filled with passion. "Thank you," he began, making the words sound even more sincere. "Thank you all for being here tonight. For a long time I was lost. I had a vision, but I did not have the means. I had a voice, but no one was listening. The soul of Ore was fading." He paused, his eyes scanning the front row. "They say that in business you must be ruthless. You must be loud. You must compromise. I was told to sell my name, to dilute my dream. I almost did." Another pause. He was a master showman. The entire room hung on his every word. "But then," he continued, his voice growing stronger, "an angel appeared. Not an angel with wings, but an angel with a business plan. An angel with a vision far greater than my own. Someone who saw the soul of this house and believed in it. Someone who invested not just money but wisdom, strength, and a quiet, ferocious courage that I have never seen before." Ethan felt a flicker of unease. Who was this mystery backer? He glanced at Marcus Ellison, wondering if he had somehow swooped in and bought the brand. "For 6 months, Adrian went on, his voice ringing with emotion, "this person has been my partner, my strategist, and my inspiration. We decided that our work should speak for itself first. But tonight, on the night of our rebirth, it is time for the silence to end. It is time for the true visionary behind Ore to take her place in the light." Sierra was on the edge of her seat, her phone secretly recording. A surprise celebrity investor? Angelina Jolie? Beyoncé? The reveal would break the internet. Adrian's eyes found their section. His gaze seemed to lock directly onto Ethan. For a split second, Ethan felt a cold dread snake up his spine. It was impossible, a coincidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian's voice boomed through the Grand Palais. "Please welcome the heart, the mind, and the soul of the new Ore, the woman who made all of this possible, Ms. Amelia Davenport." The name hung in the air for a single, silent, heart-stopping second. Amelia Davenport. Ethan's brain failed to process it. It was a glitch, a misfire. The name was familiar, but the context was alien. It was like hearing his home address announced as the location of the next Olympics. It made no sense. He looked at Sierra, who wore a confused frown. "Davenport," she whispered. "Is that an actress?" And then she emerged from the mist. Amelia stepped out from the exact spot where the models had exited, the spot directly in front of their seats. She was wearing the midnight blue velvet coat, a garment so powerful and elegant it commanded the attention of the entire room. It was unbuttoned, draped perfectly over her 5-month pregnant belly, which she was not hiding, but presenting as a symbol of her power. Her hair was styled in sleek, elegant waves. Her makeup was subtle but striking. She looked ethereal, regal, absolutely formidable. A collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by a frantic explosion of camera flashes. The photographers, already prepped for a surprise, went into a frenzy. The sound was like a machine gun firing, the light a strobing, blinding blitz. Ethan's world didn't just crumble, it vaporized. The blood drained from his face, leaving him clammy and ashen. The champagne in his stomach turned to poison. The air in his lungs solidified. He could see Amelia's face, her expression serene, her eyes cold as diamonds. She wasn't looking at the crowd or the cameras. She was looking directly at him. In that one silent, devastating gaze, he saw it all. The lies, the betrayals, his condescension. Her quiet research, not into quaint hobbies, but into a multi-million-dollar power play. The trip to Geneva wasn't a secret from her. His entire life was an open book she had just set on fire for the world to read. Sierra finally understood. The name Davenport clicked into place. The pregnant belly, the way the woman on the runway was staring at the man beside her. The color drained from Sierra's face too, but for a different reason. This wasn't a career-making moment. This was a catastrophe. She was not the star of a fairy tale. She was the gaudy, disposable villain in a revenge epic. She felt the eyes of everyone around them, the whispers starting to ripple through the rows. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Amelia walked slowly, gracefully, to the center of the stage to join Adrian. He took her hand and held it up as if presenting a champion. The applause, hesitant at first, swelled into a roar. The industry insiders, the editors, the buyers, they understood. This wasn't just a family drama. It was a legendary business story, a brilliant, stealthy takeover. "The soul of Ore," Adrian declared into the mic, and the room exploded again. Ethan was frozen, a statue of shame. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, burning holes into his skin. He saw Marcus Ellison looking over, not with rivalry, but with a kind of morbid, fascinated pity. The carefully constructed edifice of his life, his power, his image, had been demolished by one woman in a velvet coat. As Amelia and Adrian took their final bow and walked off the stage, the spell broke. Ethan shot to his feet, his mind screaming. He had to get to her. He had to talk to her, to explain. To what? He just had to get to her. He pushed past a stunned Sierra and tried to rush toward the backstage entrance. Sir, you cannot come back here." A huge security guard materialized, blocking his path with a firm hand on his chest. "She's my wife," Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "Let me through." "My instructions are clear, monsieur," the guard said, face impassive. "No one is permitted backstage." The instructions, of course, had come directly from Amelia. He was trapped, humiliated. He turned back to his seat, but Sierra was already gone, having scurried away into the crowd, her face hidden behind her hands. He was utterly, completely alone in a room full of people who were all staring at his public execution. The flashbulbs, once his favorite drug, were now the instruments of his torture, capturing his despair from every angle. He stumbled out of the Grand Palais and into the cold Parisian night. The name on everyone's lips was Ore. The face on every phone screen was Amelia's, and the story that was about to go viral across the globe was his spectacular, self-inflicted downfall. The king had not just been dethroned, he had been revealed as a fool in his own court. The fallout was not a slow burn. It was a digital wildfire. By the time Ethan stumbled back into the sterile silence of his suite at the Plaza Athénée, the story was already the #1 trending topic worldwide. The headlines were brutal and brilliant. Forbes. Not just revenge. It's a takeover. How Amelia Davenport turned heartbreak into a fashion empire. Vogue. The ultimate power move. Inside Ore's shocking Paris reveal. New York Post. Billionaire's Paris tryst ends with wife on the runway and on the board. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for drama, devoured the story. Memes were already circulating. Ethan's shocked face next to Amelia's serene one. Sierra's horrified expression captioned, "My face when I realize I'm the side character." The narrative was irresistible. The underestimated pregnant wife emerging as a brilliant, powerful strategist, while the cheating husband and his influencer mistress were publicly humiliated. Amelia was instantly canonized as a feminist icon, a patron saint of scorned women everywhere. Ethan was the villain, a caricature of masculine arrogance and infidelity. Sierra was a punchline. Ethan threw his phone across the room, where it clattered against a Louis XVI chair. He paced the suite like a caged animal. The champagne on ice seemed to mock him. He called Amelia's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called a dozen more times, his desperation growing with each unanswered ring. He texted a frantic torrent of words. "Amelia, please, we need to talk. I can explain. That was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake. I love you. You know I love you. Please don't do this." "Amelia, answer me." The silence on her end was more damning than any angry response. It was the silence of complete and total control. She had said everything she needed to say on that runway. Sierra was experiencing her own private hell. She had fled to the hotel bathroom, locked the door, and was now watching her career disintegrate in real time. Her Instagram comments, once a stream of heart emojis and goals, had turned into a cesspool of vitriol. Home wrecker. Did you enjoy the show? Watched it from the front row, right? Imagine trying to build a brand by destroying a family. Pathetic. Her coat probably costs more than your entire career. Her followers were abandoning her in droves. Brands that had sent her free products were posting statements clarifying they had no official relationship with her. An agency that had been courting her for a lucrative skincare campaign sent a curt email officially rescinding their offer. In a world where public perception was everything, she had become toxic overnight. She was crying, mascara-stained tears dripping onto the cold marble floor. Her fairy tale had ended, and there was no Prince Charming to save her. Only a locked bathroom door and the glow of a phone screen broadcasting her shame to the world. Unable to reach Amelia, Ethan did the only thing he knew how to do. He tried to regain control. He called his head of PR, a man named George Nolan. "George, you need to fix this," Ethan roared into the phone. Issue a statement. Something. Anything. There was a weary sigh on the other end. Ethan, what statement could we possibly issue? The pictures are everywhere. There are photos of you and Ms. Blake at dinner last night. There are photos of your face when your wife walked onto that runway. We have no move here. Then make one. You're a PR genius, for God's sake. A PR genius can't spin a guillotine, Ethan, George said, voice flat. And that's what this was, a perfectly executed, publicly witnessed beheading of your reputation. The advice from our crisis team is unanimous. Go dark. Say nothing. Disappear. Disappear? I have a multi-billion-dollar company to run. About that, George said, tone grim. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're invoking the moral turpitude clause in your contract. They want to discuss your position as CEO. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His company, the thing he had built from nothing, was being threatened because of this, because of his arrogance, because he had underestimated his quiet, art-loving wife. The next 24 hours were a blur of humiliation. He was forced to leave the Plaza Athénée, as the hotel management politely informed him his presence was creating a disruption for their other high-profile guests, a clear sign that his profile was no longer the right kind. He booked a flight back to New York, a commercial flight this time, huddled under a baseball cap in a business-class seat, feeling the stares of other passengers. Sierra was left behind. He sent her a single, cold text. I'll wire you the money we discussed. This is over. He cut her loose without a second thought. Another problem to be discarded. She was collateral damage in a war she hadn't even known she was fighting. Back in Paris, Amelia was in her suite at Le Bristol, not celebrating, but working. The Auré website had crashed from the traffic. Pre-orders for the Nocturne collection, which they had decided to make available immediately, had surpassed their most optimistic, year-long projections in a matter of hours. The velvet coat, christened the Davenport, had a waitlist of over 10,000 people. Penelope was coordinating with a team of lawyers back in New York, preparing the initial divorce filings. Adrian was fielding calls from every major department store in the world, from Bergdorf Goodman to Harrods. Amelia was calm, composed, the eye of the hurricane she had created. She looked at a live feed of Whitaker Analytics' stock ticker. It was plummeting. The market, like the public, had passed its judgment. She finally looked at her phone. Dozens of missed calls and frantic texts from Ethan. She read them, her face devoid of expression. Then she opened a new message and typed a single sentence. I will see you in New York. My lawyers will be in touch to schedule a meeting. It was not the response of a wounded wife. It was the communique of a new and formidable power. The game was over. Now it was time to settle the score. New York was cold and grey when Ethan landed, a perfect mirror of his new reality. The brownstone he had once entered like a conquering hero felt like a mausoleum. The silence was heavy, accusatory. Amelia was not there. Most of her personal belongings were gone, removed with a quiet efficiency, as chilling as her runway reveal. A single sealed envelope lay on the grand entryway table. It was from the law firm of Davenport, Ellis and Croft, her father's old firm. The divorce petition. The emergency board meeting at Whitaker Analytics was a bloodbath. Ethan, unshaven and exhausted, tried to project an aura of control, but the illusion was shattered. The board members, men and women he had handpicked, looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and cold calculation. The moral turpitude clause was their weapon, and the global humiliation of their CEO was the ammunition. The stock had dropped 17%. Key advertisers were pausing their campaigns. His personal drama had become a corporate liability. He wasn't fired. That would be too messy. Instead, he was encouraged to take an indefinite leave of absence, effective immediately. He was stripped of his role as CEO and chairman. He retained his shares, but his power, his identity, was gone. He walked out of the boardroom he had built, a king exiled from his own kingdom. The meeting Amelia had agreed to took place a week later. Not in a stuffy lawyer's office, but on her own turf. She had leased a floor in a sleek, modern building in the meatpacking district, the new headquarters of Ore North America. When Ethan arrived, he was led not into a conference room, but into what was clearly going to be a design studio. The vast, sun-drenched space was mostly empty, save for a few drafting tables and a single, simple table with 2 chairs in the center. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Amelia stood by the large windows, looking out over the Hudson River. She turned as he entered. She wasn't wearing a power suit or a dramatic coat. She was in a simple cashmere sweater and maternity jeans. She looked soft, beautiful, and completely untouchable. Her pregnancy was more pronounced now, a clear and present reminder of everything he had broken. "Amelia," he began, his voice rough. "I am so sorry for everything. For Sierra, for Paris, for my lies. It was a sickness, an addiction to something new, something shallow. It meant nothing. You and our child. You are my world." She listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit down, Ethan." He sat. She remained standing, a subtle but significant power dynamic. "You say it meant nothing," she said, calm and even. "But it did, didn't it? It meant you respected the thrill of a secret more than you respected me. It meant you valued the validation of a stranger more than the sanctity of our marriage. It meant you saw me as a quiet, domestic fixture in your life, not as your partner." "That's not true," he pleaded. "I was a fool. I was blind. I love you." "The Ethan I loved wouldn't have been capable of this," she replied, a flicker of genuine sadness in her eyes. "The Ethan I loved was ambitious, yes, but he was also my best friend. He would never have underestimated me. That man is gone, or perhaps he never truly existed." She walked over to the table and placed a folder in front of him. "These are the divorce terms. They are not negotiable." He opened the folder. It was as meticulous and devastating as her Paris reveal. She wasn't asking for half his fortune. The Davenport money meant she didn't need it. Instead, she was asking for something far more precise. She wanted the brownstone, which was in her name anyway. She was establishing a trust for their child that he was to fund with a significant but not crippling portion of his liquid assets. The terms for custody were clear. She would have sole physical and legal custody. He would have supervised visitation rights, contingent on his behavior. But there was one final, brilliant, brutal clause. "You'll see I've waived any claim on your Whitaker Analytics shares," she said, watching his face. "With one condition. You will transfer 5% of your total shares into the baby's trust, effective immediately. I will act as the trustee." Ethan's head snapped up. 5%? It was a massive amount, enough to give her a significant voice in the company. His company. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you want a piece of the company?" Amelia finally allowed a small, cold smile to touch her lips. "Because you built that company on the idea of predicting human behavior. You analyze data to see what people will want, what they will do, who they are." She placed a hand on her belly. "I am ensuring that our child, your heir, will always have a seat at the table of your legacy. And I, as the child's mother and trustee, will be there to protect that interest. You made me a ghost in my own marriage, Ethan. Now I'll be the ghost in your boardroom, a permanent reminder of what happens when you miscalculate. It was checkmate. She had taken his betrayal and forged it into a weapon that would give her a permanent foothold in his world. She hadn't just left him. She had colonized his empire. He sat there, defeated, the papers in his hand feeling like a death certificate for the life he once knew. He saw the woman before him, the mother of his child, and realized he had never truly known her at all. He had seen a beautiful painting to hang on his wall and missed the fierce, brilliant artist who created it. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Yes, Ethan," she said, turning back to the window, her silhouette framed by the bright promise of the city. "That's all." He left her there in her empty new beginning and walked back into the wreckage of his own making. The millionaire had lost more than a wife. He had lost his throne, his pride, and his future, all because he had failed to see the queen standing right beside him. So, what are we left with at the end of this Parisian storm? Amelia Davenport's story transcends simple revenge. It's a meticulously crafted epic about reclaiming one's narrative, a powerful lesson in the architecture of a comeback. She didn't just expose a betrayal. She dismantled an empire of arrogance with the very tools her husband dismissed: her intellect, her quiet observation, and her deep understanding of true value. Ethan wasn't just defeated by his wife's secret plan. He was defeated by his own ego, his fatal miscalculation that her silence equated to weakness. His downfall serves as a chilling reminder that the highest towers often have the most fragile foundations. This is a modern fable for the digital age, where reputations can be shattered in a single viral moment. It forces us to ask profound questions about the dynamics of power, respect, and self-worth in our own lives. Was Amelia's revenge perfectly proportional to the offense, or was it a cold, calculated move that went a step too far? And what do you think was the most devastating blow for Ethan? The public humiliation on the runway, or the quiet, clinical finality of losing a stake in his own company? We're dying to read your unfiltered thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let's discuss it. If this story of strategy, betrayal, and ultimate vindication held you captive, show your support by giving this video a powerful like. Share it with anyone who appreciates a story where the queen brilliantly outplays the king. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Our community is built on unforgettable stories that matter, and you won't want to miss the next one we unravel.